Hey guys, guess what? Things are not looking so good in Bollywood. All right, we're back with another episode of the Caniac Report. It is just me for this episode. Had a lot of things going on, and with Sam being at the game, it was just easier to do it this way. But at least you guys are getting an episode, of course. So obviously, Sam's not with us for this episode, but he'll most likely be back for the next episode. And yeah, so you guys are just going to be having me. And yeah, the Hurricanes are having it pretty rough right now, but we will get to that. First things first, as always, we do have a link for donations. If you ever feel like you want to donate, there is a link for that in both our traditional podcast spaces like Apple, Spotify, all that stuff, and also on YouTube too. Remember, we are on YouTube. So if you are not watching us and just listening to us through Apple or Spotify, that's fine. But if you want to, be sure to head over to YouTube, just type in the Caniac Report. You will find it. And be sure to hit like and subscribe. That will really help us a ton. And if you're even listening to us, I would say on the traditional podcast side of things, be sure to leave a rating and a review. That helps us as well. So that's pretty much it for podcast stuff. But we're going to get into some league news stuff. Something did happen today as I'm recording this. Chicago fired their head coach and Luke Richardson. And to me, I mean, when it came to the firing of Luke Richardson, I didn't know if that was the right move. Because here's the thing, even with the additions of like Tavo Teravainen and other veteran players, you also had Nick Foligno over there too. With Chicago, Connor Bedard obviously is kind of the face of the organization of now. They still have a lot of developing to do. And I wonder if, again, I wonder if firing Luke Richardson was the best thing. I mean, obviously, coming into his moment of being fired, they were 8-16-2, I believe. I'm just going to check the standings here. But Chicago was on a 4-game losing streak, and it seemed like the general manager in Chicago is like, you know what? We just need to fire you. We need to get better. And while I do think he did added some pieces to help Bedard and the other young guys progress, I mean, I would say I a little bit see why, but at the same time, I think everybody can understand this is still a rebuilding team. This is not a team that can compete, obviously, with the Colorado, the Winnipegs, the Minnesota's doing fantastic. And even though Colorado, who we're versing tonight, isn't doing good, we all know the talent that they have. So it's very interesting for Chicago, especially if you look at that division. It's very tough, but we'll see how Chicago does. They did hire an interim head coach for the time being, but it does sound like once the season has ended, that they will be on the official coaching search, unless their interim coach kind of gets them back, somewhat gets them back into the conversation of maybe playoffs. But again, I think all of us viewed that Chicago might be getting better, so I do see why they might have fired him. But at the same time, this is still a team that is really, really rebuilding. So another thing is that I thought this was interesting. Elliot Friedman talked about this a lot in one of his most recent episodes in 32 Thoughts. Is the news of Chris Kreider and Jacob Trouba from the New York Rangers. Apparently, word got out that they're on the block. Obviously, we all know that, but apparently that shocked a lot of teams, and I can see why they might have shocked a lot of teams because it can definitely affect the locker room chemistry. And with the Rangers not doing good right now, that can definitely be a good indicator or a indicator of how they haven't been performing well. Now, they did win against Montreal, I believe, this past Saturday. But regardless, Rangers are not doing good. And I will say this as a Hurricanes fan, I am happy they're not doing good. I am because I don't like the Rangers. Obviously, you know my co-host, if you've been listening to us, he hates the Rangers. I would say I don't like them. And yeah, I probably would say I probably hate them too, just thinking about it. But I don't express my opinions as much my co-host does, which is fine, to each his own. But I mean, the Rangers aren't doing good, and those players being out there, seems like some teams are trying to. Let's say if they're trying to trade and improve, they don't want to be like the Rangers and get have the stuff leaked out, and I can see why they don't want any trade rumors or anything getting out that could affect the locker room. So I can understand why they're doing that. And that's pretty much it for that type of subject. The next thing, which I think is probably the biggest thing, other than the firing of Luke Richardson, because that is pretty big, is the roster for the four nations is set. America and the America team and the Canadian team, their roster were announced. Now, I am also going to mention this when we bring up some Hurricanes news thing, but I'm just going to mention the players other than the Hurricane players because I am going to mention them and give my opinion on them making it maybe a player that hasn't. But just to give you guys kind of a bit of a view of what the rosters are like, you have Sam Bennett. This is for Canada. Sam Bennett, Anthony Cirelli, Sidney Crosby. No surprise there. Honestly, no surprise probably with Sam Bennett either. Brandon Hagel, Seth Jarvis, which again, I'll talk about that. Travis Konechny, Nathan McKinnon, Brad Marchand, Mitch Marner, Connor McDavid. Those are two obvious. Well, I would say, yeah, Marner, McDavid, Point, Ryan Hart, Mark Stone, Cale Makar, Josh Morrissey, Colton Parayko, Alex Petrangelo, Travis Sanheim, Shea Theodore, Devon Taves, Jordan Bennington, Aiden Hill, and Sam Montembeau. And I think that is actually a pretty good roster. I do. Probably, I would say a couple of surprises that I see. If I were to say surprises, probably Sam Montembeau, just a little bit. I understand Jordan Bennington, I actually do, and I don't think there aren't. I don't think there's any huge surprises on the Canadian roster that I see that made it. Now, there's always going to be critics, as usual. That's just how the world works. So, I, I mean, I don't see any players coming to mind that aren't on the Canadian roster that probably should. Now, if I was given a list, then yeah, but I'm not that good, unfortunately. But I do think that is a very good roster. I am a little bit. If I were to point something out, I would say probably a little bit surprised that two Philadelphia players were on the Canadian roster. Probably just a little bit, but other than that, not too surprising for me. USA, Team USA. Here's their roster. Matthew Boldy, excellent. I love Matthew Boldy. Kyle Connor, love Connor. Jack Eichel, Jake Gensel. Gensel might be a great player, but we all know how our feelings are from a Hurricanes perspective on him. Jack Hughes, Chris Kreider, a little bit of a shock with Kreider, just because of the season he's been having. Dylan Larkin, Austin Matthews, JT Miller, Brock Nelson, Brady Tkachuk, Matthew Tkachuk, Vincent Trocheck, Brock Faber. Excellent defense. I love Brock Faber. Adam Fox, Noah Hannafin, Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy, Jacob Slavin, Zach Werenski, and then your goalies are Connor Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger, and Jeremy Swayman. This is going to be a fun Four Nations face-off. I think both Canada and USA have really, really good rosters. Obviously, you have the teams like Finland and Sweden too. Obviously, we know Aho is on Team Finland, and I'll just go. Well, we'll just stay with US and Canada for now since they were just released. But congrats to the all those NHL players for making it. And that leads me to some Hurricanes news because it is true that not only two players that I mentioned made the Four Nations tournament, but three did. And Jarvis, Aho, and Slavin all made the Four Nations tournaments. I think that is excellent. I was actually a little bit shocked that Jarvis possibly would make it, but he did. I'm very happy. Now, it seems like he's probably going to be the 13th forward, but even then, I think that is a huge accomplishment for Seth Jarvis, considering how good and how young he is. And I do think Jarvis mostly has played pretty fine. I know the Hurricanes are in a rough skid right now, but I do think one of the bright spots is Seth Jarvis. He's been playing very good. And another player that comes to mind, and I saw that this was noticed on X, is that KK did not make Team Finland. And to be honest, I'm fine with that. Ever since, if you guys remember the New Jersey game, or if you don't, we lost 4-2 against New Jersey. KK's been playing fourth line minutes. Basically, like around 10 minutes a night. And two things I have to say about that. One is related to the Four Nations tournament and the fact that if you're playing fourth line minutes, you're probably not going to make the Four Nations tournament. Just not. So I understand why KK is not on Team Finland. But again, it is what it is. Heck, if we had kept Teravainen, we would have two players on Team Finland because Teravainen did make it. Congrats to Teravainen there. But it doesn't surprise me. And to be honest, even though I still think he has been playing just a bit better than last season, probably not at the start. If you compare the start of last season to the start of this season, probably not as good, obviously. But the season as a whole, I think he's playing a little bit better. But at the same time, him playing fourth line minutes, I think, is a little bit concerning for him. And I have mentioned this in previous episodes before. In fact, I don't think Sam and I have talked about KK recently. We might have, but my thoughts on KK playing fourth line center, it I'd be shocked just a little bit, but probably not at the same time if Dundon looked at KK playing 10 minutes. He's like, I'm paying you over 4 million and you're on the fourth line on Rod Brendamore's team. And it just sounds like Rod Brindamore has his trust has gone down on KK. And if he is thinking that, then you're right. And to be honest, I think that advocates more of buying out KK because I've always thought they should have bought him out before the season started. Now, obviously, they can't do it now. You can only buy out players when they're in that buyout window. And from what I've heard, currently we're not in a buyout window, I believe. But I do still think KK should be bought out. And do I think he's part of the problem of why Carolina isn't doing good? Yes. But at the same time, it's not like, I think they can live without him either. I do. I mean, I just don't understand. My whole thing, especially with the goalie situation, which we will get to, is that let's say you do put Anderson on LTIR and all this type of stuff. Obviously, you'll be facing cap repercussions if you got out and got like maybe a big starting goalie. That's only if you get a starting goalie. I think if you just get an average goalie, probably you can get him for cheap and it doesn't hit the cap. But let's say you do, you can't do that because Anderson soon, probably around what, February maybe, is coming back, and now you're over the cap. And what I have to say about that is basically, well, should have bought out KK. I don't want to hear this complaint. And I mean, it's not like I've heard complaints about the Hurricanes being tight on cap space. But at the same time, if you're trying to do something in goal and trying to improve the team, you should have bought out KK at the same time. That's kind of the point that I'm trying to get at here. So I still believe that he is, but he's still on the team. So that's not going to change anything as of right now. And now comes to the goaltending. Hurricanes sign a player on PTO, which didn't really surprise me. He was doing well on that PTO. He got a couple of shutouts with Chicago. Dustin Tokarski. Or Tokarski, yeah. And again, doesn't surprise me. And they bring him up. Another thing that doesn't surprise me, they send Spencer Martin out. One thing I have to say about that is okay, sounds like the Hurricanes are going with their own mantra, trying to see if they can get a good, cheap contract with Tokarski and see if he can play well in the NHL. And only time is going to tell on him. I'm not going to say that he's not the goalie. He has played quite a few NHL games. My opinion, I don't think he's the goalie the Hurricanes are looking for. But again, only time will tell. And obviously, I do think that if Tokarski does not work, I think that really forces their hand on trying to get a goalie. But at the same time as I'm saying this, if they want to get a NHL goalie, it probably is going to be a little bit hard. You might have to sacrifice some draft picks, but I think that is a little bit okay. Again, as long as it doesn't break the bank if you're just getting an average NHL goalie. Now, if you're getting an NHL starting goalie, yeah, you're going to have to pay a lot because two things that I noticed in the NHL is there's a shortage in two areas on the ice: starting goalies and second line centers, which I think Carolina has another problem with second line centers. But again, it's hard finding these players and it costs a lot to get these players. That's why you don't really see a lot of trades for them. So at the same time, if the Hurricanes were to get a starting goalie, I don't think they need to at the moment, though I could see them getting it. To me, it just really depends on how Kochetkov plays. Again, I think Kochetkov is more of a roller coaster type of goalie. He can really hurt you or he can really help you. And with Anderson, it's more if he hurts you, it's because he's complacent, because he's lazy. And we obviously saw what happened there in the playoffs last year. So we'll see how the goaltending shakes up. I think only time's going to tell with Tokarski. Regardless, though, just my opinion, I don't think he is the answer that the Canes have been waiting in net. But that's pretty much it for Hurricanes news. Now we're going to get to the two games, but before we do, let's get to a couple of our sponsors. The 24-25 NHL season still has that new car smell, and the action is heating up at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get started at DraftKings Sportsbook. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. And if you are new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ice.
One of the things I like about watching hockey is the physical play we get to see, which is why Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes it easy to see your favorite team, concerts, or shows. One of the upcoming games I am looking forward to is a Canes vs. Capitals game in January. And yes, that is my co-host Sam, if you heard him. They have a few super deals that are under $100 in lower level seating. That's why one of my favorite features is the super deal. Remember, you can also get to view from your seat in the app before you apply. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code THPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code THPN for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Now the Seattle game. Sorry. We'll get to Colorado later. But the Seattle game. Boy, this was fun. No, it was not. This was a very frustrating game. And I'm just going to mention the lines that were played this game because I might have a nickname for Rod Brindamore. I think I saw it on X somewhere, but I think it's just a perfect nickname for him whenever he mixes the lines together. And I think we should call him Rod Blendamore. Trying to be a little bit humorous in that approach, of course. But it's Robinson, Aho, Netchus. Then you have Martinuk, Stahl, Jarvis, Svetch, Jury, Roslovic, Carrier, KK, and Blake. And in the first period, you have right out the gate, you have Drayden Schwartz scoring. And it's like, oh no, not good. And then, obviously, you have Robinson scoring from Netchus. And that Robinson goal was good. It was the cause of a turnover. Honestly, I thought two Seattle players kind of caused the turnover. One which passed it to the other. I think his name was Shane Wright, who was the receiver of that pass. And he just fumbled that puck. And then Netchus does what Netchus does, able to find Robinson is all alone, and he scores. Again, great goal. Obviously, didn't really like the Schwartz goal because I thought that was more of a defensive error than a goaltending error because I don't know what Chatfield and Orlov were doing there, but it's 1-1. And I thought, honestly, the first period was the best period Carolina had against Seattle. I really do. And then the second period was probably the worst period I thought the Hurricanes played. I really do. And you can tell the fans sensed it. Like the fans were not in it. They were not in the game. You can tell they felt disengaged. And I understand that because that second period was brutal. Really was. Seattle had 14 shots. Carolina had 2. And while I thought Seattle, to their credit, they played a very good second period. And eventually they do get a goal from Tolvanen. And it was just an ill-advised puck. I thought it was more of a puck management issue from Gossespierre. Another thing that I think part of the reason why I think Carolina's on this losing skid that they're on right now is the Walker Ghost pair have not been very good defensively. They just haven't. And that showed an example of that as Ghost more just tried to avoid a play than to strategically get the puck out. He just bats at it. And Colorado was sorry, keep mixing Seattle and Colorado up for some reason. But Seattle is able to take advantage of that, and it's Tolvanen scoring. Now, initially, Kochetkov, he makes the save, but he gives up the rebound, and Tolvanen scores. I thought that was more brutal defensively than the first goal because you would think that defensively Carolina needs to help Kochetkov out with that rebound, but they don't. I don't know what Walker or Ghost were doing there. So that was just brutal in of itself. And honestly, the whole period just really, really terrible. This I mean, I remember the home opener against Tampa. It was not like that. The home opener against Tampa, I thought was more of just the Canes being rusty. This was a period where Carolina just felt disinterested. Those were the two differences. So obviously, end of the second period and then into the third. And this is the third period where honestly, Carolina Hurricane fans most likely are losing their minds over because you have hope. Netches is scoring on honestly just a beautiful play that Netches did, just coming down the side of the boards and just putting it 5-hole on Seattle's goalie. I mean, that was just beautiful. The assist goes to Aho and Gossespierre. And then after that, it seems like we're in the lead, right? Just Jeremy scores. Now, at first, I was livid. When it came to the goalie interference thing. I was because it wasn't so much the hit because looking back at it, I did think Robinson kind of did just it's very small, but he did enter in the crease. It's not so much the hit, it's the fact that their goalie, Seattle's goalie, was able to reset. I thought that was the big thing. And while I still think that on any other given night in a situation like that, it could still be a goal. And to me, that's what's frustrating. And second, if we're getting to the point where, oh, it's a jury goal, of course it's going to be overturned. Oh, it's a Hurricanes goal interference call. Yeah, it's not going to go in our favor. Then it does make me frustrated at the officials. It just does. And I think Canes fans have every right to be. And Brindamore has a right. And apparently, which I think is wrong, the NHL wants to basically not let their coaches vent for at least a couple minutes. They just want to keep silent on the officials. And I do think, to be honest, what would make things better is to make officials actually speak after NHL games. I do. But that whole goalie interference thing, it's just frustrating. Some might think that was goalie interference. Some might not. And that's just the reality of it. But over time, I've noticed I've just become more frustrated with it just because it seems like it's just the norm when it comes to goalie interference and the Hurricanes. Whenever it happens, it just goes against us. And to be honest, I do think that what put more salt into that wound of goalie interference was the goal from Yanni Gord. I think if there wasn't a goal, probably maybe after a couple minutes after that goalie interference thing, I think we probably would have been a little bit more easy. I'm not saying that we would totally be easy about it, but I think we'd be a little bit more easy on that play. But I mean, that was just a killer. First, you get a goal taken away from you, and then Seattle scores, and then they just on that Tanev goal. Obviously, Kochetkov tried to go for the poke check, and it was not the time to do it. Again, when it comes to Kochetkov, he needs to be better at the timing of his poke checks and going out and try to be more puck focused than being focused on the player. So, I mean, it's just frustrating. But Seattle, they win it 4-2. And another thing too with that goalie interference thing, I do think that that was not the reason why the Hurricanes lost. Seattle was the better team. Even though I thought Carolina best period was the first period, Seattle dominated the second period. And I think part of them dominated was just because Carolina was disinterested. They were. And Carolina, I mean, they came out with some fight, I thought, toward the end of the third period, but Seattle still had control of the game. And at that point, if you're up 4-2, there's not really any pressure, so much pressure on you losing that game. I mean, I think Carolina has good offense. Obviously, Natchez is the star of the season, but it's very hard for Carolina, obviously, in a situation like that, to score 2 goals in 2 minutes. So, just a frustrating game. But now, on to the Colorado game. This game against Colorado, Canes played a lot better, especially I believe it was against in the second period where Carolina was really, really doing good. And I am bringing up the score here, but much better game, 3-5 win. And in the first period, you have Lakeinen scoring on the breakaway. That was a very bad breakdown on D. I mean, you just can't have Colorado's players kind of, well, I like to use the term cherry picking. And they did that not I mean, even though they were successful that one attempt with Lehkonen, they did that probably 2 times already. But Kochetkov stood strong. I thought Kochetkov had a good game, even though I thought there was one goal, and I believe that was the goal that made it 3-2 in the third. But you have Lehkonen scoring, and it is disappointing because Carolina was playing the first period pretty good. And then you have Robinson scoring from Burns and Netches. A great shot from Burns, and Robinson is able to deflect it. So it's 1-1 heading into the second. Although you kind of wish, honestly, that it wasn't tied, that you're winning, because I mean, the shots were 15-6 for Carolina, and it kind of showed Carolina was definitely the better team. I would say throughout probably the first 40 minutes, I thought the third period was a little bit even of a period, but Carolina, much better game. In the second, that's when they started to get the goals on Scott Wedgwood. You have Seth Jarvis scoring on the power play from Aho and Svetch. And man, Jarvis, ever since he came back from that injury that he had with his shoulder, he seems like he's a different player. It just does. He is doing so good. And even during that stretch where we're losing 3 games, he was definitely a highlight during those 3 games because he was playing good and he's putting up goals. It's amazing. Jarvis is definitely one of my favorite forwards, even though I still think Netches is my favorite forward. Not because of his production. If you've been listening to us for, I would say, for quite some time, probably for the past, I don't know how long we've been doing this, 2 years, you probably heard me say before, Netches is my favorite player when he's on. And in past seasons, he's been a roller coaster. This season, he has been dynamite. And Natchez, again, he has 2 points tonight, leading the league with 41 points. Just amazing. And then you have Jack Roslovic scoring from Svechnikov and Walker. And I do want to talk about Svetch for this game. I thought he was good. He put up 4 points, a goal, and 3 assists. Really, really good. Although at the same time, I think with the chances that he had, he could have had a hat trick. There was a chance that he whiffed on I believe, in the first period that he probably wish he had back. And I think there was another chance in the third that he could have had. I mean, there were chances where Svech could have scored. And while I think he's good, he's good at passing the puck. I think he wears his heart on his sleeve the most when it comes to a shot, which can bite him because I do think he puts a lot of confidence in his shot to the point where if he doesn't have confidence, it shows. So, while Svechnikov, I thought he had a good game. I think if he's better, he has like 2 or 3 goals because he had a lot of chances. And in the third period, we're feeling good. Canes are winning 3-1, and it's good because we are actually commanding a lead. Because if you guys notice, the past several games, we kept coming into at least the third or second period being down, and we had to keep crawling back and win. And that is not a recipe for winning. It's fine to do it like every now and then, maybe throughout the season, which if this is one of those instances, that's fine, but you cannot make this a rhythm for every game or else you're just going to tire yourself out. But Carolina was able to establish a lead heading into the third period, and there was a little bit of a scare. Nikishin does score. I think that's a goal Kachekov needs to have. Valery Nikushkin, he's coming up wide from a great pass from, I believe, it was Kelly. And he's able to kind of put it, I think, right, kind of shoot it right next to Kachekov's pad, I believe, to be sure. And it's just not something Kachekov should give up. And I was a little bit disappointed because I'm still waiting for the game for Kachekov to not let in the soft goal because I don't think we've seen that yet. But it is still a young season, so we'll see what happens. But again, nerves start to settle in. But then Colorado, they take a too many men penalty with 2 minutes left in the third. And you know what? Who scores? The red hot Martin Netchus. There's an assist from Svechnikov and Gostisbehere. Svechnikov, man, putting up 4 points this game. Again, I think he's good, but as I said before, I don't need to reiterate that. And then Nikushkin scores again. And I don't really blame Kachekov for that goal just because it was kind of as what John Forsland would say, if you guys remember him, it was just a massive humanity right in front of Kachekov. And for goalie, I'm sure it's very hard to see a puck when there are like 4 or 5 bodies in front of it. And there was just a lot of bodies in front of, or just in the midst around the puck. So it's not that type of goal where I'm like, oh, Chekhov should have had that. I'm sure it was pretty difficult. But Svechnikov, he is able to score on the empty net. Funny enough, he had one attempt, but was but give Colorado, I believe, that player credit because he was able to block it and not let it go into the empty net. But Svechnikov was able to persevere, and he is able to put it into the empty net to solidify the game 5-3. Good for Svechnikov. He is always known as the empty net wizard. Funny thing is that after that game, I was talking to my dad because he's a huge Hurricanes fan. You guys have heard him. He's been on the episodes in the past. But I was just telling him, you know what? It'd be funny. Says Svechnikov did a lacrosse school on an empty net. I think that would be funny. Probably maybe a little bit disrespectful to the other team, but regardless, that would have been funny. It really would have. So that's it. Carolina's able to end their 3-game skid, able to get a win against Colorado, and now they play Saturday, I believe, against the Islanders. So we'll see how that game does. And just to like preview the month, this month is obviously less busy than the month of November. I do think, even though I thought the Canes won and played a much better game, I do think it would benefit the Hurricanes to have probably, and I think we're about to have this too, where the Canes coming up next week, they only play one game in 4 days. So they will be getting somewhat of a break. And I do think they need that just because they've been playing so much ever since uh, probably the midweek of November. So great win against Colorado. We'll see what happens. And we will see you guys Monday.